The conventional tools had about 12% success rate in crossing these occlusions for revascularization, but our CAT-pilot technology was able to achieve 92% success in this
Wow.
worst case, so it was obviously significant. And we have consistently shown this result. Recently, we just completed usability studies. We saw almost identical numbers that we are able to better cross these occlusions and to do them in a shorter time and do them in a safe fashion.
Welcome to NGBiLab, a podcast about innovators and disruptors who are creating the next generation of companies in Canadian life sciences. I'm Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Ali Tavallaei, who is co-founder and CEO of Magellan Biomedical in Toronto. Magellan is a medical device company working on solving a problem that has been hiding in plain sight for almost a century. That problem is that the fundamental tools used in cardiac catheterization have not really changed since 1929. More to the point, in some of the most critical procedures, industry-standard tools fail up to 20% of the time. What Ali and his team at Magellan Biomedical have invented is a technology they call the CAT-pilot, which is a device that gives surgeons precise local control over the tip of a catheter during minimally invasive cardiovascular procedures. Ali and his team have a 92% success rate versus the rate of conventional tools, which are typically about 12%. Needless to say, they are fundamentally changing a standard medical procedure that is long overdue for disruption and innovation. Before we get to our conversation, we'd like to let you know this podcast is part of the NGBi podcasts in support of Next Great Big Ideas, Canada's Life Sciences Summit. NGBi is a national networking event for Canada's life sciences community, and we invite you to join us. For details on this year's summit, please go to nextgreatbigideas.com. This episode of NGBiLab was recorded in January 2026. Ali, welcome to NGBiLab.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. And before we get started, I just want to mention that you are originally from Iran, and we're recording this interview in mid-January 2026. And there's significant social and political unrest there and at the moment. And I understand many protesters have lost their lives. It's a tragic situation, and this is not a political podcast. But I hope any family and friends that you have there are safe and the situation resolves peacefully and as quickly as possible.
I really appreciate that. And it's definitely very difficult times as Iranians struggle and fight for freedom. Yes, hopefully it'll be resolved soon. I think we're very close and on the verge of victory.
Knock on wood. So let's jump in. I read that when you were growing up in Iran, you were trilingual, and at about 18 years old, you taught an English class to people who were much older than you. Did that experience instill a love of teaching?
Yes, to some extent, I would say. I mean, it sort of runs in the family. My dad is also an English literature professor. But yeah, I was fortunate that I lived in Australia for a few years when I was a kid, as my dad was actually getting his PhD. And I learned English. And when I came back, as a method to sort of make sure I remember, I kept studying and parallel I started teaching. But it was a great experience, but it also, yes, helped ingrain love for teaching, but also the self-confidence to just go up there in front of a crowd to start speaking. Yes, it was great. It was a very valuable experience.
It's a little unnerving when you're first starting out, especially at a young age. When did you and your family come to Canada?
So I came to Canada in December of 2008 or just January of 2009. I came here as a PhD student to do my PhD studies. I actually started initially at Ryerson University back then, now Toronto Metropolitan University, transferred to Western and did my PhD studies at Western at the Robust Research Institute.
Sorry, and you are a professor in the Department of Electrical, Computer, and Biomedical Engineering at TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University. How long have you taught there?
So now it's about 6 years now. And yeah, I've been quite fortunate that I've been able to sort of do what I love and do the research I love, as hopefully we'll talk about a little today at that department, and have the opportunity to work with many amazing people and students at that university. Yes.
Yeah. And again, before we get going, for those listeners who may be unfamiliar with TMU, formerly Ryerson, I would appreciate you giving us a quick overview of the school.
For sure. So Toronto Metropolitan University is one of the most rapidly growing universities. It used to be primarily a polytechnic or technical university, but since then it's been rapidly growing, and now many departments and faculties excel in various aspects. Our department, for example, electrical, computer, and biomedical engineering, has more than 50 faculty members. I think the university has 40, 50,000 undergraduate students every year. So it's a huge, one of the exciting recent developments is recently we have started a medical school, TMU's medical school, which is a great addition. But the university also excels in various other areas such as law and business, arts, and so forth. But I think I'm very proud to be part of the electrical, computer, and biomedical engineering department, which is, I think, the largest department, one of the strengths of the university.
Yeah, to a degree, it is a gem hidden right in front of our eyes for many people, which is unfortunate. But one of the goals of this podcast is to make more people aware of all of the cool stuff that's going on that we may not be looking in the right direction. So in December of 2020, you were appointed a Level 2 Canada Research Chair in Systems and Devices for cardiovascular interventions. And this is a very prestigious appointment that recognizes groundbreaking research, which is a great segue into our conversation. Let's talk about your research and your company. I read that according to the World Health Organization, cardiovascular disease is the -- cause of death globally. I'm going to ask a painfully obvious question. When did this get on your radar?
Well, since I was a PhD student, actually, when I was a PhD student, I was working with Dr. Maria Drangova at the Robarts Research Institute at Western. And my thesis was primarily focused on image-guided robotic-assisted cardiovascular interventions. And we were specifically at the time trying to help address challenges with atrial fibrillation and the ablation, the heart, specifically to isolate the pulmonary vein arteries. And that disease and that problem, as you may know, is significant. The main cause of stroke. And since then, I realized, well, this is a huge, huge domain. As you mentioned, it's the leading cause of death, and it has been, and there are various opportunities to help improve the outcomes of these procedures and help improve the efficiency as well for the healthcare system. So yeah, it's been almost 18 years that I've been working on this.
And again, for those listeners who may not be aware, London is a national, if not a global center, quite well known for diagnostic imaging. So this fits right into everything that I've heard about all of the great stuff going on in London. So if I understand correctly, your research and the company is focused on generating new image-guided therapeutic and diagnostic solutions, I guess, to improve on what has been a treatment that has gone virtually unchanged for about 100 years, which boggles my mind.
Yes. So as you pointed out, it's almost shocking that the fundamental tools that we are using to treat and manage or even diagnose various cardiovascular diseases rely on long and flexible devices known as catheters. Since their inception and the first demonstration in humans in 1929, they've fundamentally been the same approach. We have this long, flexible tube that you're manipulating from outside the patient's body, and you introduce it into the vasculature and try to navigate it to various segments of the cardiovascular anatomy, and then use the tip as you manipulate it from outside the body, try to manipulate the tip of this long flexible device to get it to go to various locations and either deliver therapy or make measurements and so forth. So in a way, you're right. I mean, fundamentally, the tools have been at their core the same. I mean, we have had iterative improvements, but fundamentally at the core, yes, they have been the same.
Now, there are literally millions of cardiac procedures done every year. I had one done last year, so I'm a big fan of the research you're doing, but up to 30% fail or have to be redone. So basically, again, if I understand correctly, you and your team are focused on improving cardiac catheters, correct?
Yes, I mean, that's one of the indications of our technology. So just to provide some context, we are trying to help improve the navigation and control of catheters, as you mentioned. But this has various applications, and cardiovascular disease is a whole range of diseases. One of the most common ones is arterial occlusions, where you have the arteries gradually get occluded, and as they get occluded, the blood that they're supplying to that organ, the heart or peripheral limbs or neurovascular, that blood supply is obviously lost, and obviously the corresponding tissue dies. And one of the most common, the main approach to help treat and manage this condition is you try to go in there as a first step with a wire, go through that occlusion, and then try to put a balloon over that wire, track it, and try to open that occlusion and restore blood flow. And sometimes you may deploy a stent. So this is generally referred to as angioplasty and stenting. So that's one of the indications of our technology, like the fundamental technology that my research program is focused on, trying to address this fundamental problem. We've done a fair bit of studies to try to sort of understand and characterize why do these procedures fail and what are the limitations of the conventional tools that lead to failures in such procedures. And once we understood, well, this is what's happening, which I'll be happy to discuss more if you're interested. And then we sort of developed this solution that addresses that fundamental flaw in conventional tools. But as we did that, we realized, wait a second, there's a whole range of opportunities here for all these various minimally invasive procedures that have suffered from the same fundamental limitations of conventional tools.
And as we're chatting here, it dawns on me, we haven't mentioned that the company that you and your co-founders created is called Magellan Biomedical and based in Toronto. When was the company founded?
So the company was founded in 2018. It's a spin-off from Sunnybrook Research Institute. I was a postdoctoral fellow at the time, and I was working with amazing folk. My supervisor, Graham Bright, who at the time was the director of the Schulich Heart program at Sunnybrook. And I was also working with the head of vascular surgery, Dr. Andrew Dueck, and Dr. Trisha Roy, who at the time was a PhD student / vascular surgery resident. Now she's at Houston Methodist as a scientist, as a clinician there. But I was quite privileged to be working with these amazing individuals. Yes, so I was a postdoctoral fellow, and we were working on characterizing arterial occlusions, specifically in the limbs, peripheral arterial occlusions. And we were imaging them with high-resolution MRI and micro-CT. And we were trying to relate those imaging features to mechanical performances of conventional tools to see, how do these conventional devices interact with these lesions and what leads to procedure failures, and can we predict outcome? And as we were doing that study, that's when we understood the limitations of conventional tools, and Magellan Biomedical was sort of born. At the time, I was working as a co-op student, James Zoe, who's now also a co-founder of the company. And with all these other individuals that I mentioned, we decided to form a company to sort of help commercialize the technology that we came across.
And I guess there's one other co-founder, Daniel Hawkins?
So Daniel Hawkins is our business advisor.
Okay.
So he's the former CEO and co-founder of Shockwave Medical. Shockwave is perhaps the most prominent company in this space, which was recently acquired by Johnson & Johnson. So Daniel provides us with strategic advice and is our business advisor. And we have obviously various other clinical advisors and also engineering advisors to help us. I just want to highlight Dr. Marianne Broadman and Dr. John Runback that are also providing us with clinical advice and expertise.
Hi, it's Jim. When we come back, Ali talks about how the idea for Magellan came together at Sunnybrook Hospital and what it took to go from an idea to becoming a company. Stay with us. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab, Canada's life sciences startup podcast. Hi, it's Jim Wilson, and I'd like to take a moment to talk about the next Great Big Ideas Summit, which is coming this fall. If you are part of the Canadian life sciences community, NGBI is one of the key events you want to put in your calendar. The NGBI Summit is an independently organized, not-for-profit, national networking event that attracts innovators, investors, disruptors, academic entrepreneurs, industry suppliers, today's leaders, and startup founders from coast to coast who are quite likely many of tomorrow's industry leaders. The summit is an event that generates the kind of conversations that happen only when the right people are in the room. So, if you are a member of the Canadian life sciences community, and frankly, even if you're not but you'd like to be, this event is for you, and we invite you to join us. For details on sponsorship and to purchase tickets, please go to nextgreatbigideas.com. Thanks so much. We look forward to having you join us. Let's get back to our conversation. Hey, welcome back. It's Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Ali Tavallaei, co-founder and CEO of Magellan Biomedical in Toronto. I'm hearing that most of you met at Sunnybrook and you're all focused on generally the same thing. Whose idea was it to co-found a company?
Primarily my idea. I started my first company when I was a PhD student. I was doing my PhD studies at Western. And I guess I'm really of the philosophy that the research in our domain, which is medical devices and systems, for it to make an impact, you really have to commercialize to allow it to get out there into the hands of the patients and the clinics. Otherwise, in our space, it's very difficult to help share the outcomes of that research. Unlike many other fields where you can, for example, share the code or you can share the understanding or the new knowledge you've generated. In my domain, which is applied engineering and system development, it's really that prototype or product that you're generating and designing. And that, unfortunately or fortunately, has to go through that regulatory pathway and it has to go through that commercialization process correspondingly for it to go out there into the clinic to make an impact. So I did this very early on in my PhD studies and I had that experience. And then I did this medical innovation fellowship together with the University of Minnesota and Western. They had a program, medical innovation fellowship. And with these learnings, I was really of the philosophy that we have to form a company, and this is a platform technology, has various potential indications. It'll be a shame and a lost opportunity, and we wouldn't be doing justice or proper service to the patients and the clinic if we don't, because otherwise, if you just publish a paper, it'll sit on a bench and it won't make an impact. So it'll be a lost opportunity.
Yeah. Sunnybrook is a fabulous incubator for ideas and commercialization. And we've had Raphael Ronan on our sister podcast, NGB Ideas. And one of our guests this year is Claire Vahainen, who is about to step down as the head of the Research Institute. And again, it's such a fabulous piece of the Ontario and the Canadian life sciences community. Was there a collective aha moment that everybody went, yeah, you're right, we should do this? I'm assuming there wasn't any convincing that had to take place here because it seems like it was an obvious need.
Yes, I think it was the experts that truly understood this problem. Great credit goes to Dr. Graham Wright and Dr. Andrew Dewitt. They really understood the science behind this, is because, as you pointed out, like Sunnybrook Research Institute has been a leader in this space, specifically when it comes to medical imaging and image-guided therapies. And one of the studies that actually goes way back more than 20 years, again at Sunnybrook, was imaging these CTOs or chronic total occlusions, or arterial occlusions, with various imaging modalities such as optical coherence tomography or ultrasound. And Graham Wright and others were part of this. So they had a very detailed understanding of what these occlusions look like, what are the fundamental challenges, and the research that I was part of really helped put everything in context. Okay, well, based on the understanding of these lesions and the limitations, mechanical limitations of these devices, this is what's really happening. So as we came across the solution, then it was sort of obvious that this makes sense. But we didn't just decide to form a company based on assumptions. We validated our assumptions. We actually did experiments that validated the limitations of conventional tools and quantified them, and we published it. And then it was really ingrained that yes, this is a fundamental limitation of conventional tools that can be addressed with this technology. And then we were super convinced that, okay, this is worth investing money in and we want to dedicate our time to. But I remember even before those studies, we were unsure. We had a hypothesis. We thought, this is what's happening, but we didn't know for sure. But only when we did these validation experiments to test for these limitations, we became certain that, yes, this is what's happening and this is the flaws or limitations of conventional tools.
I would guess because this took place at Sunnybrook, there wasn't a huge amount of administrative or any pushback from the hospital because it is such an innovative place. Walk me through the process. How long did it take to go from there's an idea here that we want to pursue to getting a green light and getting it designed and using it?
Well, yes, you're right. I mean, Sunnybrook is extremely welcoming of new innovations. Obviously, there's default processes that you have to go through, such as disclosures and review of the prior art and corresponding licensing of the technology and so forth. But that's pretty much standard in all academic institutions. But The design and development of the prototype itself obviously is a very long and tedious and challenging process, because you have to go through various iterations and you have to test. And our device is, I would dare to say, it's fairly disruptive. It's very different. So because of that, there's various, usability studies, and there's many other challenges that you have to sort of address to go through that process. Obviously, as a first step, we developed a proof of concept prototype. We validated the hypothesis that we had, and then we had quite a fair reception from Sunnybrook, and then we were able to gather the support to form the company and move forward.
So do you have FDA approval?
So no, not yet. We have completed our pre-submission meeting with the FDA, which went extremely well. Our device will be a 510(k) device, so it's a very straightforward regulatory path. So we're in that process.
And beyond FDA approval, you've gone through clinical trials, I'm assuming.
So we have tested our device with actual human chronic total occlusion samples from amputated patients. So unfortunately, there's no good model, because we humans eat a lot of junk food. In animals, we don't have a lot of chronic total occlusions. Yeah, it takes many years to develop in humans. So the best models of CTOs are actually in humans. So what we did was we actually had, unfortunately, patients who were amputated. Their procedures had failed, but they represented the worst case scenario or the most challenging occlusions. We took more than 30 samples of these arterial occlusion segments from these amputated patients, compared our technology, which is the CathPilot, head-to-head to conventional devices in crossing these occlusions. And one of the things we saw, which the main observation, was the conventional devices in this worst case cohort, just amputated patients, they had failed procedures, that's why they were amputated. The conventional tools had about 12% success rate in crossing these occlusions for revascularization, but our CathPilot technology was able to achieve 92% success in this worst case, so it was obviously significant. And we have consistently shown this result. Recently, we just concluded usability studies. We saw almost identical numbers that we are able to better cross these occlusions and to do them in a shorter time and do them in a safe fashion. One of the other things I should mention, I haven't really talked about the procedure, what's really happening, if I may.
Please, yeah.
So when we're talking about angioplasty, the first step, as I said, perhaps typically through femoral access, you introduce a device known as a guide wire. And now we're specifically focusing on peripheral arterial occlusions. And I should put that in context, by the way. So more than 230 million adults suffer from peripheral arterial occlusions. Every year, there's more than 3 million procedures done to help revascularize these patients. The sad reality is, if you don't treat these patients, it leads to amputation. And every year, there's actually more than 470,000 amputations that's being done. So if you just, for the audience to think about that number, it's the population of a city every year being amputated, a large city for that. And you can imagine, it's not just the amputation. Just think about the psychological effects of that for the patient, the change in lifestyle, the depression, and just the family members and the entire healthcare system. So it's a massive, massive issue. And we know the morbidity of these patients, because of all these various factors, is very high. Once you're amputated, your 5-year mortality could be as high as 80%. So it's a major, major issue. And that's what we're trying to address as a first indication, to save these limbs and the lives of these patients. So now going back to what the procedure is, what we want to do in a minimally invasive procedure to help revascularize these patients and help restore flow to their limbs, is you take a guide wire, a long flexible wire. The analogy would be a snake you put in the pipes to open a clog, very similar analogy. And then you try to navigate this wire and take it to the tip of that occlusion, and then as you push and pull and rotate this wire, you try to cross that occlusion. And once it's crossed the occlusion, hopefully if it is, then you can follow, you put a balloon catheter over that wire, and it traces that wire, and hopefully it goes through that occlusion, and then you can open that balloon and dilate that occlusion and restore flow. But the problem is, based on 2 randomized clinical studies, we have immediate technical failure, meaning that we just simply cannot cross that occlusion. In about 15 to 20% of the cases, we know we have immediate technical failure. So we just simply cannot cross that occlusion. occlusion. And that's the fundamental thing that we are trying to address to help better not just position the wire, give it the extra support. Because what happens with conventional wires, we actually proved this as part of another study. Conventional wires sit on the periphery of the artery. Because you can just imagine it can't magically levitate itself as a long, flexible device. It has to lean against something. So as soon as you start pushing it tends to go on the periphery of the artery and it starts to go into the wall of the artery. So it starts, going subintimal or starts perforating the vessel. But with our CAT-pilot technology, we prevent that from happening. We allow the clinician to precisely position the tip of the wire in a systematic fashion. They know exactly where it is, and it helps bias it off the vessel wall, and it helps them get extra pushability and support to actually penetrate these stiff occlusions in a safe manner. So now going back to those studies that we did with actual human CTO samples, we were able to show that not only can we drastically increase the success rate of crossing these occlusions, as I said, 92% success in crossing the occlusion, but we were also able to do it in just 95 seconds, very efficiently. And also, with conventional tools, unfortunately, we saw that they perforate the vessel wall, or they go through to have a tendency, again, because they sit on the vessel wall, they lean against the vessel wall. As you push it, they penetrate the vessel wall.
Can cause huge problems, right?
Huge problems, especially in the coronary, which is our next indication. Causes huge problems. And that happened 9 times with the conventional tools, but it only happened once with the CAT-pilot, so almost a 10-fold improvement. So in other words, we showed that the CAT-pilot can do these procedures better, safer, and faster. And we've also done animal studies, and in the animal studies, we were able to show there's no visible sign of damage to the vessel wall or coagulation in the device. And more recently, as I said, we completed usability studies with a range of clinicians in interventional radiology, vascular surgeons, and cardiologists, and we were able to find similar results, as I said, very consistent, not just in terms of performance indexes for crossing success rate, but also in terms of usability scores. Our device actually outperformed conventional tools that we've been using for more than 50, 60 years.
Thank you for that explanation. That is such a great story. It boggles my mind that it's taken this long for an improvement to this procedure to be found. Wow. Hi, it's Jim again. When we come back, Ali talks about where the company is headed and why he believes an acquisition may be on the horizon sooner than most people expect. Stay tuned. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab. If you're a new listener, we would like you to know one of the goals of this podcast is to shine a light on up-and-coming startups in Canadian life sciences and the people and stories behind them. We hope you like what we're doing, and if you do, we will greatly appreciate your help promoting us on social. You can use the hashtags NGBiLab, NGBI Podcasts, and NGBI Summit. By the way, if you're a startup founder who is working on a next-generation idea in Canadian life sciences, please reach out to us. My contact information is at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much. Let's get back to our conversation. So what has been your biggest win so far? This device is not currently available in the market, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, they're working on it.
Right. And I think what I'm clearly hearing is everyone in the world would want this device who's in cardiology.
Cardiology or vascular surgery or interventional radiology. Yes. One of the things we've seen is once you experience using it, it's very difficult to go back. I mean, control and the precision that it offers you is not comparable to conventional. With conventional tools and conventional catheters and wires, unfortunately, there's a lot of guesswork. Because again, as I said, you have this long, flexible tool that you're manipulating from 1.5 meters away as it goes through this long, tortuous anatomy. And then you're also guiding the procedure with X-ray fluoroscopy, where, as projection imaging, everything's projected on a 2D image. You don't have depth perception, so you don't have 3D visualization, and you don't have a lot of soft tissue contrast either. So you don't really know where things are. You don't have control over the wire tip. You're manipulating it proximally from outside the body. So there's many, many procedures where this fundamental limitation prevents improved outcomes. And we really, I would say, we've accepted, unfortunately, the status quo with a lot of these devices. Conventional catheters, they've been the same for the last 100 years or so. Deflectable catheters, 50, 60 years ago, they were invented. Fundamentally, they've been the same. We haven't had any major disruption to this field with a new approach to navigate controlled catheters. What our technology offers, the CathPilot, it uses a self-expanding frame. It anchors onto the local anatomy or chamber or vessel wall at that target location. And then it uses a set of cables that are supported by that frame or anchor to locally manipulate the catheter. The way it's designed is mathematically it's over-constrained, so the catheter has no option but to go to where we command it to. So this is unlike any other conventional tools where we're proximally manipulating. Now we get local manipulation and control. And the other feature that it offers, because of that local manipulation, we're able to track the device's position to show the user where they are exactly relative to that local anatomy and where they have been. So it changes a sort of a random guesswork into a very controlled, systematic process.
What has been your biggest win so far?
Well, I would say these studies that we just completed, the usability studies that we demonstrated, we are able to maintain the success rate of 91 to 2% versus the conventional tools, which is with the chronic total occlusion samples, it was about 12%. In these most recent usability studies, it was slightly higher, about 30%, 28%. But we were consistently able to show that we were able to significantly improve success rate. We're able to drastically reduce the procedure time, and we're able to do it in a safer fashion. So I would say these are the main success and wins that we've had so far, and hopefully they'll translate into the clinic once we start our clinical studies.
So has the company been bootstrapped since day one?
No, unfortunately, in our field, it's very difficult to bootstrap because you can't get regulatory approval to sell easily. You need regulatory approval to be able to sell it. So in our domain, usually you depend on investment. So we've been very fortunate with non-dilutive capital from government funding agencies. We were ranked first out of 40 applications in the Canadian Institute of Health Research, or CIHR, commercialization grants stream, which is a very competitive grant. I'm very proud of that. And we've had many other fundings from NSERC and CFI, as well as other granting agencies, and also Innovate and Sunnybrook. So we've been very fortunate in that sense. And so far, more than $2 million of grant money has gone to the company in that sense. But we've also had investment from friends and family and angel investors. So we've had private capital come into the company in that sense. And now we are actually in our other round. We're trying to raise capital to help us get through our clinical studies and regulatory approval.
How much are you trying to raise?
So we're trying to raise $2 million US.
And so if, again, a listener is interested in investing, you would welcome that call.
Absolutely, yes. We do have a lead investor, a group of interventional radiologists that have led the round, and they believe highly in this technology. And we would definitely welcome investors that are interested, and feel free to email us or contact us.
What is the minimum investment, Ali?
So minimum investment would be $25K USD.
Okay. This is such a great story. Where is the company going to be in 2-3 years?
So in 2 or 3 years, we would definitely have completed our clinical studies, then we would be in sales. And I think the likelihood of an acquisition is quite high before then, once we have our 510K approval. Because, based on the discussions we've had with a lot of the strategics, there's very high interest in this. And there's various other indications for the technology, including robotics and oncology and other sectors that I can't talk about the specifics at this time, but there's various other indications. But based on the interest that we've seen, I think, it'll be a success story whether we're in sales or acquisition, but I think the chances of acquisition before scale are very high for this as well.
My head is spinning. The fact that you folks put a team together, tackled a problem which was long overdue for innovation, and are well on the way to success is such a great story. I'm thrilled. Good luck to your team, and I look forward to future announcements. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here and sharing our story, and I'm looking forward to hopefully joining you on another opportunity, another chance.
That was Ali Tavallaei, who is co-founder and CEO of Magellan Biomedical in Toronto, Ontario. To learn more about the work Ali and his team are doing, please go to MagellanBiomedical.com. You can also follow Ali on social at _Tavallaei. That's TAVALLAEI. If you'd like to learn about this podcast, please visit nextgreatbigideas.com. You can also follow us on social at NGBI Podcasts. For details on who I am, please visit jim-wilson.ca, and you can find information about my day job team at laboccupier.com. You can also follow me on social at laboccupier. This episode of NGBI Lab was researched by Xenia Pinto and edited by No Limit Marketing. If you'd like to get in touch, email is best. My address is jwilson@Leonard, that's LENNARD.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.